Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings be unto you all. I am Minister Jamie Eatman, and I am on the rise. I'd like to thank you all for joining me, those of you who have, those of you who will, and I thank those of you who will encounter this later. I trust that you will hear what you need to hear for as long as you need to hear it. That's totally up to you, but it is made available to you, which is my intent.
There is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
And I, for one, will join in with anyone. Don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth.
Greetings, I am Jamie Eaton. Join me Fridays at 8 p.m. to our On the Rise movement. Yes, you do have to rise. As a matter of fact, if we rise, that it be even that much better. When it comes to rising, it's very important that we realize that we should do so. We have far too many reasons to do so than we do not to. But unfortunately, we do a lot less rising than we do being complacent. And I say we because I like to say we because I am one of many. You know, in the Bible, it speaks of the body of Christ. It has many members, but one body, and we're all a part of that body. Our program today, it pertains to we individuals and our communities. And if you think about that concept, we individuals and our communities are made up of individuals. The effectiveness and what that community look like, it all depends upon the individuals that are found within it. There's a saying that goes, there's like usually three type of people: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who don't know or wonder what is happening. But within the community, find those individuals, and it's those individuals that actually determine or help to determine what's going on or what does happen or will happen. Can't determine how it's viewed. Sometimes your best intentions can come out the wrong way. Again, I'm Minister Jamie Eatman, and I thank you all for joining me. We are on the rise. Let us pray. Most Holy Father, we thank you. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to spend this little time together. I pray that everything that's going to be said and done would be to your honor and to your glory. I pray that you open eyes, ears, minds, and hearts. Pray that you will give us more wisdom, knowledge, understanding, as well as revelation as it pertains to this life, your world, and this world and your work. I just pray that you have your will and have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And actually, we're already started. But in any case, I thank you all again for joining me. And as we get started, I want to start off with something that is going to be a real icebreaker. I was searching for some videos that represented some good information that we might want to know. And do you know that as Black people, there's this term reparation? How many of you all are familiar with that word? If you're not, I should say shame onto you, but why would I say that? Because it's something you hear about periodically. It'll come up, it'll go away. It'll come up, it'll go away. Is this something we want? Is this something we want to talk about? But in any case, the word came up, and believe it or not, it wasn't from the mouth. This next video you're about to watch, it kind of gives you the mindset of some people that what they might be thinking about that term reparation. Give you a little bit of insight on what it is. Supposedly, during the days when America became so great, you know, when America became such a great power, uh, when it came down to finance, it became a producer of all the goods and the service, not services, but goods that they spread abroad. One was like cotton. If we know where the history behind cotton, cotton was king. So we kind of know the history there. And if you can add one and one together, regardless of how much history you know, and you think in terms of finance, the more cotton, the more money. The more cotton you can get for nothing, the more profit. So it was kind of a picture like that. But when it comes down to that, how that relates to reparation is this: cotton is only one of those things. During the days of slavery, the labor was free. So if the labor was free, that meant that everything was produced beyond that which they paid, and I guess paid, fed the people that were working, however they looked at compensating. Everything else was profit. So during that time frame, there was a lot of money made for over 300 years, as a matter of fact. So there was this discussion concerning reparation, doing something for those peoples whose ancestors did all of that work. Yes, slavery, reparation. Yeah, you got an idea who we talking about now? Yes, people of color. So as I'm about to share a video with you, it was one that was done with someone you. I'm sure you're going to recognize this guy, and I recognized him right away. But what kind of surprised me about him was what he had to say. So when I listened to him, it was really interesting. I think I have the right video here.
TV psychologist who has gotten rich off the back of a black woman had this conversation with Professor William Darity of Duke University in regards to reparations. Check it out.
If you take $350,000 or $840,000 and you write a check to any group of people, black, white, poor, homeless, whatever, you give any group of people that much money and say, there you go, best of luck, and you come back in 6 months, they're going to be broke. So whatever reparations are done, that would be an absolute disaster as opposed to guidance and help in creating generational wealth as opposed to income.
Right.
That would be an absolute disaster.
No one ever says that that there's going to be mismanagement of funds when we're talking about the distribution of reparations payments to other communities.
I just said it. I just said you give that money to anybody, they're going to mismanage it. They're going to blow it. Look at the fraud that just occurred with all of the money that was given in support of COVID.
So as you heard him say, that if that amount of money, which as the professor said would be about $14 trillion divided up among 40 million black Americans, which would mean that they would get about 350.
Now, as you notice, my sister did something that um, it was interesting because when she went to the portion about what he said, which is kind of what I introduced, I want you to realize how people think, but I also want you to realize how effective we have to be in our communication. Because as she started in about how he got where he is, based on the back of a black female, the conversation was really intelligent one pertaining to reparation. Not to say that her comment wasn't, but she put something out there that most people that are emotional is going to remember her emotions. But I use that clip not to address her emotions, to address Oprah or Dr. Phil, because as he was speaking, he did say some things that we should be insulted by. And in life, we can actually take some of those things that are insult and be insulted by them, or we can take them as motivation. And what I mean by that is this: there's a thing that's called dissatisfactional inspiration. When you are dissatisfied with people say, think, and how they treat you, and so forth, it inspires you to do something different because you want something different. So I wanted to play that because in no way did the man even say that it wasn't due, which is what most people will say, because that amount of money out of anybody's budget, any country's budget, it would put them probably among some of the other countries where they should be had they not had the advantage of the free labor from slavery. So when you look at topics like these, they're very important, and as little or as much as one knows about them, it will impact how they deal with issues that they confront. Sometimes a person might feel like we're asking for too much, but then when you listen to what that conversation is about, look how much is owed. That's a large sum of money, and when you think about it, if that money is owed, and how does it get back out to the people, or does it get back out to the people? We have to realize that there's a lot of information out here, and what we do with it and how much of it we know first. We have to acquire it, And then once we have it, what we do with it. Because some people can gain knowledge and they just set on it. They don't do anything else with it. That knowledge isn't going to, it's like having a seed. If you never plant it, it's never going to produce anything. And unfortunately, that is the case in some instances with some of us in the learned community, some of us in the community of wisdom. As like you heard me mention, praying for more wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and revelation. God gives some of us revelation, but that He tells us in our quiet time, are we actually going out to speak it as we are asked to do so? Some of us may, and some of us may not. But this is about we individuals and our communities. So we as individuals, we're just that, individuals. But we're a part of a larger group or a community. And being part of a community, there are some things that comes along with that as far as responsibility. And there's a lot of irresponsible people in the world. So that's not to say that everybody within a community is productive citizens. You've been hearing for the longest, it takes a village to raise a child. And if you look at some of our communities, they haven't changed much. There's ongoing discussions about people that acquire knowledge and take it back to their communities versus those who acquire knowledge and never do. It is thought that for some, when they get that knowledge, it is just that knowledge and it is for them. It empowers them, and basically, they do what they will with it. But this show, On the Rise movement, is about educating, motivating, and inspiring individuals to rise above life situations and circumstances. But the first thing you have to keep in mind, as I said earlier, how do you rise above a situation or circumstance that you cannot adequately assess, that you cannot adequately judge? It becomes very difficult. So that video, just listening to with Dr. Phil there, as he spoke, when you assess the situation of how long ago that money was made, and for him to be concerned about what the people would do with it, even if they got it and took it back to the bank and said, I don't want this, that should be their choice. There's just certain things, when it's old, it's old. And your bill collectors, when it's due, they remind you that it's due. If so, if we follow that duration, they just gave you an idea of how much money is in question. And that's a question that's not going to go away, because there's some that believe in what the Bible says. And the Bible makes reference to the people that were there in the land, and when they went free, how they would go free with the wealth. And what does freedom look like? I ask that question for this reason, because if you look at our leaders, there's some things that they're saying that they have said, and the things that they are saying and they have said, they were spoken to us when a leader uh, individuals speak, but in reality, and those individuals have to make decisions. So I'm saying that to say this: when the conversation was made by some of our leaders, if you listen at some of the things they said, they're very interesting. For example, one of my favorite people, Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass made the comment that as far as leaving the United States, or this place where, he wasn't even up from slavery good, but he made the comment to think that we will be driven out or we will leave is absurd. He was literally stating that we're going to be here. And he put it in a manner, he said, we will go with this people, even either as a testimony in their favor or a testimony against them. Now, when a man makes a statement like that in the day that he made it, he had to be driven by something greater than selfishness. He was driven by truth. And there are men and women like you and I today that should hopefully be driven by that same truth. When things become complacent or get to a point where people begin to lose their voice, we know that we have issues and we know that we have problems. It's one thing for people to have a voice and not use it, but it's another when they try to silence you. And if you think about the little bit of history we know about those who have came, the things that they have done, and how it was the whole the world's whole intent was to silence them, because there's this war that's going on, and many people don't even realize it, but it's a war every day. The Bible speaks of wars and rumors of wars. If we look in the world, we can see where there is war. There are threats of wars. People don't realize it, but who we select as our president, it has a great bearing on how serious people take us as it pertains to being a threat, and how threatened they are by us. So therefore, how eager or how unwilling they are to enter into war. So all those become issues, but it's just a matter of being wars and rumors of wars. I said that not to address the war aspect, but those people who are in the know and the news and information that we're getting. We again, individuals, we come from various communities, and we have leaders, some of our choosing, some by their profession, and some, unfortunately, might even consider themselves to be self-appointed. But either way, when someone speaks to you, going back now to the we individuals and our communities, we need to be able to judge the things that are said to us, to include our leadership, particularly within our communities, because people have their self-interest. There's some people that are for sale, and there's some people that have money to buy. And unfortunately, when opportunity arises, there are some people that take advantage of it. There's what's called people that are sellouts, or some that have sold out. And whenever that occurs, those are individuals, but it's the community that suffers. So I'm using these two words interchangeably because I want us to see that it's really not just about us. When we start weighing things in our lives, if we're solely looking at it from our perspective, for one, that's called selfish. And that's what people look for. They look for someone selfish. Going back to the slavery concept, there was people that worked in the house. There were people that worked in the field. In order to work in the house, you had to be trusted. And when you were trusted, your life was a little bit more luxurious because of the fact that you were trusted. But there was always this tension, those in the house and those in the field. But it goes back to we individuals, because at the end of the day, they came from the same community. And it's no different today. If you look at this world, and we are here in the United States, that is our one of our communities. We have many communities that we are in, and that we are part of. But when you look in the United States at a community, I remember I was listening to um, Mr. Gregory, and he said, he made extra comment. He was being interviewed, and his comment was concerning evil. And he pointed out, he made a statement after he asked the question. He then followed up with this: "You're evil." He told him that you're evil. Because if you're in a country where you're selecting the lesser of two evils, and those evils are representing you, and you're going out and you're voting for evil, what does that make you? Evil. People would find that hard to accept, especially when we got the mindset: if you have a vote and don't use it, don't say this and don't say that. Those same people don't really think about the fact that you had a vote and used it, and you can't even ask this or ask that. So when you look at it, we as individuals, have to really assess what is it we're about, what is it we desire, what is it we want. And based on that, we have to choose who we are going to be within our communities. We all have an obligation to our communities. And if we can just work at fulfilling that obligation, our communities would be better off, no doubt. I want to share another video with you. This person that's the topic of this video is a very interesting person. I always heard the name. I don't watch much television, but I'd heard the name many times, and it was always in relation to this person being a Republican, a Republican, a Republican. And when I finally got to watch one of the person's shows, I did something I rarely do. I wrote a comment on the person's page. Now, here it is: the person has millions of views, millions of people that are commenting, and will probably never see mine. But I thought enough to leave a comment because I was that impressed with her. And this next video kind of addresses one of those things we want to be aware of as members of our community. This person represents several communities. So as you listen, please pay close attention. She represents the Black community in the fact that she's a female. She also represents a religious community because the people that oppose her, as this article states, was from another religious community. So unfortunately, there's a lot going on here. But what I want you to do is listen to this, and I'll tell you why I thought this was worthy enough to share with you.
Candace Owens and conservative website The Daily Wire have officially broken up. Friday morning, The Daily Wire CEO Jeremy Boring posted on X, quote, "Daily Wire and Candace Owens have ended their relationship." He did not give a reason on the circumstances that led to this shift. But earlier this week, the Anti-Defamation League highlighted the fact that white supremacist Nick Fuentes applauded Owens' rhetoric on Jews. Owens has been outspoken in her commentary about Jewish people in politics, in the media, and her support for Palestine.
Regardless, based on her latest episode posted just yesterday, the news may have come as a surprise to Owens. Take a look.
I'm not going to go away. I'm going to use my God-given voice to talk about the things that are important for me. I'm just asking to be left alone, or at least just report the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. But don't worry, because we will see you tomorrow for a brand new episode.
The controversial right-wing commentator took to her own X account, posting, quote, "The rumors are true. I'm finally free," end quote. There will be additional quote, "There will be many announcements in the weeks to come." Owens joined the Daily Wire back in 2021. So a little bit unclear about what's next for Owens here. Very obvious she's not with the Daily Wire anymore, and that whether it was a firing or they had a conversation this morning that ended in them deciding to end their relationship, all of the language makes it sound like they broke up and that it was a romantic relationship. They're going their separate ways, though. I was just saying yesterday to a friend that it might be the case that Ben Shapiro's keeping Candace Owens at the Daily Wire despite his pro-Israel views, to show that even though there was reporting that was pro-Israel, hey, we had this other host at the Daily Wire that was saying something else. It seems that that's not a strategy at all at the Daily Wire, and who knows if it was their choice or Candace's choice, but curious to see what she does next.
Yeah, I mean, based on the fact that she said, "See you tomorrow," that definitely suggests that the Daily Wire pulled the trigger and fired her. I think, people who have been following some of the internal feuding at the Daily Wire probably are not super surprised by this. It's definitely the case that Ben Shapiro was very troubled by her views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. He is obviously one of the most pro-Israel voices in conservative media, and they've had public tension around what she's been saying on her show. There was one point a few months ago where I believe she was trying to get Ben Shapiro to convert to Christianity or something along those lines, and there was this huge argument over whether what she said was considered anti-Semitic, and really just things started to unravel from there. But I think Candace Owens is going to be fine. It looks like she has her own website that she's encouraging people to go to now. I wouldn't be surprised if she tries to do a show on X similar to what Tucker and Chris Cuomo are doing and Don Lemon attempted to do, and just go directly to the viewers. She is one of those sort of names that can definitely draw an audience on her own without the institutional backing. But it seems like it's going to come with probably a pretty significant pay cut. Based on the reporting from when she was hired, she was getting a pretty hefty salary from the Daily Wire, and she'll have to make up for that with subscriptions if that's the route that she decides to go and decides to be independent. But again, I'm not surprised by this at all. It seemed like this was brewing for quite some time.
It's very sad to see the state of American media with the unfolding of what's happened since October 7th, that we've seen the expectation that the American people as a monolith support Israel because Israel is an ally, and for having a state must be anti-Semitic. But to assume that a state represents people who are not its citizens is something that we've fought against as a country. We have fought for countries to not become ethno-states and instead be democratic states. It's something we've used as a reason to go overseas and fight for people's freedom over. And we've called people religious extremists, the State Department themselves, for folks trying to establish a caliphate, an Islamic state. But to be fine with a Jewish state, it's not anti-Semitic to point out that that is hypocritical. And
That is hypocritical. How you like that? Some of y'all may not, but yeah, they was talking to a community, and this program is about individuals and our community. So it was talking to you. It was talking to me. And as the young lady pointed out, there's some things that have been going on, and we read it all the time in the news. Some of us might even fear it, but it is real. And I shared that with you because that addressed a whole lot of issues. It addressed the right, it addressed the media, it addressed the fact of her having a voice and being outspoken. And one of the things you want to keep in mind, individuals that are a part of communities, a community have a voice. And depending on how outspoken that voice is will determine how much attention that community gets. For example, that reparation issue. Here it is, Dr. Phil, 100% comfortable saying that people getting money for reparation, and if we put this in perspective, that black people giving money for reparation, they would get it, and in a certain amount of time, they would then be broke. So somehow you can't trust the people with their own money. You can't trust them with what they're owed. Now, my comment isn't really directed against Dr. Phil. It's directed against the community, not a community of white people, but a community of America. Because when people can say that, that means that they're comfortable. Their community hasn't made them aware that there's a problem with that. And on the other side of this issue, with the Candace issue, when they make reference to the Jewish, here we are in the United States, and anti-Semitic is a word that we all heard, we're all familiar with, particularly at the highest level of politics. This was for me a shining star when it comes to media. Not only did she oppose them, but she opposed some other issues that people wouldn't normally speak about. And to see that she was let go, regardless of what the reason was. When you're looking at media today, people get jobs to speak the truth. That was her comment. I just want to be left alone and speak the truth. How many of us would want that, someone like that leading us, someone that's going to speak the truth? How many of us feel obligated to do that as individuals within a community? Speak the truth. And sometimes that truth that we speak, it has to be to our community as well. One of the things that we truly want to be aware of is our effectiveness or ineffectiveness within our community. That becomes very important. I'm going to share another video with you all, and then I'll go over my slide presentation.
Now, can you imagine the Dems having that kind of... Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for today's talk. There's an urgent situation unfolding in America, and today I'll unveil all the unnerving details. So let's get started with a critical question. Where were you on March 9th, 2022, when President Biden signed the death warrant on American freedom? On that day, in a hush ceremony at the White House, without the approval of Congress, the states, or the American people, Biden signed into law Executive Order 14067. Buried in his order are a few paragraphs titled Section 4. The language in Section 4 makes Order 14067 the most treacherous act by a sitting president in the history of our republic, because Section 4 sets the stage for legal government surveillance of all U.S. citizens, total control over your bank accounts and purchases, and the ability to silence all dissenting voices for good. In this new war on freedom, the Dems aren't coming for your guns. No, they're thinking much bigger than that. They're coming for your money, and it's already started. Hi, my name is Jim Rickards. I'm a former advisor to the Pentagon, the White House, Congress, the CIA, and the Department of Defense. I'm also an attorney, investment banker, and author of 7 books on currencies and international economics. When places like Fox, CNBC, or Bloomberg want to know what's about to shake up the global economy, they call me. Most of all, like you, I'm a proud American patriot. The disturbing predictions you're about to see are based on my independent research and my contacts in the intelligence community. I've never made this kind of public announcement before, but it's my duty to pull the alarm. This is what I believe Section 4 of Biden's order means for all Americans. The U.S. dollar will be made obsolete. Soon your cash will be confiscated or will simply be worthless paper. The cash currency we have now will be replaced with a new programmable digital token. But the truth is, few outside the deep state recognize Biden's move for what it really is. If my predictions are correct, this is so much more sinister than simply replacing the cash dollar with a new digitized version. Friend, this new currency will allow for total control of all American citizens because every digital dollar will be programmed by the government. That means they will be able to turn on or turn off your money at will.
Okay. They will be able to turn on and turn off your money at will. Now, for those of you who like to use the term conspiracy, that's a big part of the problem of what's going on. That particular bill that he mentioned, you can look it up for yourselves. There's a young lady I'm hoping to have as a guest on the program, but I didn't want to invite her prematurely. I wanted to cover a certain amount of space and put certain issues out there so that at least in my own mind, I would feel that I'm doing her justice by inviting her. But there are some things afoot that they're already coming down the pipe. They've already been signed. It's just a matter of them rolling it out. And in reality, if those of you who you've ever gone to another country and you purchase something and you leave and you did not turn your money into them, when you get back, you have money. It's money. It's had value, but it doesn't anymore. Well, if you can imagine going to a digital system, which means that your dollars are either going to be worthless or you'll be given a chance to convert them to whatever. Thank God most of us at some point has some type of pay system where the money is all of that is already done to a degree. So with the banks and everybody on board, it'll be a pretty easy conversion. And just to show you how, uh, and I won't use the word crooked, I'm going to try and be correct. But just to show you how masterful the government is, for the longest, cryptocurrency was considered to be a currency of those who were drug dealers, of those who was laundering money, and so forth, because our government had no control of it. And the truth be told, in some instances, they still don't. But the thing is now that it's becoming where they've come up with their own digital currency, which will operate on the same blockchain, which is the mechanism that operated the Bitcoin. So now the government is doing, in essence, something that is so similar to what they call criminals were doing, that they're using the exact same they criminal what they were doing, which was to their advantage because they wanted to control. They wanted a degree of control. And that gentleman that was speaking, that told you all the places that he worked for, he's probably been working for all those places a long time, probably has many government secrets, just like many of us in some of our jobs. But he's telling what he's telling now because investors have money to invest, and those individuals that represent them and their money, that's how they make their money. So he's trying to explain to the rich people that have enough money that they don't want to fall under this system or that they want to hide it. So now what you had with the so-called drug dealers using blockchain for that purpose, what he's probably about to offer is a pre-existing system that's already in place. That's what's called centralized and decentralized. Decentralized, you have your wallet, nobody knows what's in it. Centralized is what the government is looking to do. When someone can actually count what's in your wallet. And when you're talking about a digital wallet, it's not like the wallet we carry now. It isn't like the money that we can put in the mattress. It isn't like we can lie and say we got 5 and we really have 10. When the computer starts to accounting, and when the computer starts counting, that's what we're looking at. and add to that the ability to cut your money on and off, can you imagine you're somewhere and you're suspected of a crime or whatever, and what little money you had is of no use, not because it doesn't work or it won't spend, but because they turned it off. It's no longer spends, it's no longer recognized. And so what do? You cut it back on when you're cleared. That is what supposedly where we're going. And when you look at that, that is a level of control that is almost unheard of. I listened to that guy's report, but I wanted to share that little bit to make you aware. There's some things that are occurring, and sometimes I often use the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, this crisis that's going on, there are some things that can be done, even minimally. And it's amazing that when something is can be done that will help you, and it's available that will help you and your community. And if the community pulls together, it can empower itself. But if it does not, it becomes less empowered. And usually it's because it's less informed. But what I'm going to be sharing, I'm hoping to inform and I'm hoping to empower. And I'm hoping those individuals that I'm informing and empowering will share their empowerment with others. Okay, let's go to this presentation. And those of you who were with me last Friday, this should look very familiar, because one thing that I have learned when it comes to talking about anything, it's almost the same thing no matter how you look at it. State of affairs is just a broad topic when on the rise movement. You would need to be addressing something, the state of affairs of this, state of affairs of that. We're talking about the state of affairs of our community, but we're also individuals. We individuals and our community. So let's talk about this for a moment. Well, let's back up one. Okay, state of affairs, economic and race matters. Economic. Why is economic keep coming up? Everything deals back to money. Money answers everything. I've heard that someplace. Have you all heard that? Money answers everything. But there's also the saying that the love of money is the root of all evil. So we want to have a consciousness that we need money. I pointed this out during the Montgomery boycott. When they boycotted the city buses, it wasn't their presence that was missed. It was actually their dollars. Economics is actually about power. And when it comes down to power, again, looking at that community, we as individuals, we know how hard we work. We know how hard we struggle. And the way we struggle and the money that we make or fail to make, or the money that we use or fail to use, however you want to look at it, it becomes important that we begin to realize we have power. It just depends on how we use it. It was fascinating for me when I learned that, a person doesn't have to be in charge. They don't have to be the business owner. They can be the most lowliest one and still have power. There's different type of powers. There's expert power. You can be the subject matter person that you have the knowledge. That's a form of power. And when you look at power, you got to know how to use it. Power demands respect. And actually, I shouldn't say demand, because whether you demand it or not, power will earn respect. Dr. King said, if you build your house upon a hill, if you can build a better trap, if you can do it better than that's out there, the world will be the path to your door. And it's that same way with that type power. When you possess knowledge, when you possess ability, economics is one of those forms of power. It has to be utilized though. And the issue I have, race matters, because believe it or not, when what Phil was talking about was a matter of race. Because when you look at, he was talking economics and race. No clearer example. Reparation deals with money owed to slaves when, let me rephrase that, money owed to blacks by the whites that were the slave owners, money owed to the slaves by their slave masters. So because this country history is such that it was built by slaves and there are descendants of slaves, and the people that reap the benefit were their slave masters, and there have they're the descendants of the slave masters, then it's looked at the reparation that it is due to balance that or compensate that is something that today, if we looked at it as a debt that to be paid, it would be due a particular community. And it wouldn't just be by a community, because it would be by the entire community of the United States, which the same people that be receiving, which is another community, would be entitled to. So when you get into issues and matters like this, it becomes very important you have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on, or maybe a little like me, enough to say something to get you in trouble. But in any case, I said it. State of affairs, economics. There's 1.3 trillions. That was the gross income, gross national income. So if there's 1.3 trillion that this particular people represent, imagine if somehow, we can call for a fast in our churches. We can call for a fast within our religious denomination. That's all those are communities. My church is one community. My denomination's another community. My city's a community. My state, just however you want to group them. But imagine if there was an effort to really just go on this fast and everybody sent this amount to one location. Can you imagine the power that that would represent? Just like that. It wouldn't even have to be that great of an amount, but done more than once. Every time it was done, it would empower that much more. That's the type potential power that they see within the black community. That's the potential power that exists. But there are people like Dr. Phil who have certain beliefs and certain philosophies that give that money to them, and they're going to waste it. They'll do that, but hold it back under the premises that they might waste it. And I don't know if those people were paid or if they actually believe that, but that you see the yes man, the house people. Did you see the house people? They're nodding yes as that statement was being made. That's the community that we're in. It's a divided community. It's divided in our own community as a black community where we live, or if it's a mixed community, there's division there. We may not even know our neighbors. There may be this division, a race division there in that community. Within our cities, in that community, on our job, within that community. But we're still part of those communities. And when we start looking at them and they are dysfunctional, we as individuals need to realize that we are members of a dysfunctional community. And that community, if we allow that dysfunction to continue, if it's like one of those jobs, if your children come behind you and get a job at that same dysfunctional place, it's going to be just as dysfunctional then as it was now. So it behooves us all that if we have the ability, the occasion, I'm going to give it to you in the rise language. If you have the occasion to make a difference, you need occasion before you can rise above the situations and circumstances. So here we are with this great amount of money here. Okay, and it says here that of all this money, only 2% recirculates within our community. Only 2% recirculates within our community. Now that can be changed, but that is a project there that's going to take, I won't say greater minds than minds, but it's going to take a greater focus than the average individual is willing to consider. It's going to call for a strategy. It's just not going to change just like that, because people are creatures of habit. We're happy with taking our money to spend it in this place as opposed to that. We're happy once we get enough knowledge to build a business or possibly do something that'll benefit our community, that we realize there's not that much community, that much money in it. So we'll take it some other place. But there's some things that are changing. And how do I know they're changing? Because they're changing for me. And what difference do I make? I'm an individual. We individuals and our communities. I'm a member of that community. And if I believe it can change, I talk to enough people about change, it might actually bring about change. but it takes conversation, that's for sure. Okay, state of affairs, community statistics. Last week I gave you a statistic on how long a dollar stayed within the various communities. I'm only addressing the black community right now. And there's a reason I'm only addressing the black community, because I just gave you the statistic for the black community. But that 2% that says that a dollar only circulates one time or 6 hours within the black community. Why am I saying that? Am I saying that to say that the black community is irresponsible with its spending? No, you judge that portion. But what I am saying is that our dollars, because they don't stay in our communities long enough, there isn't enough money there to look at hiring some people or creating some job opportunities there. We're looking to the government and all these other places for that money, when if it was a strategy and a little creativity and a little sacrifice, we could do some great things. But as I said, it isn't going to happen on its own. It's going to take some people willing to rise to the occasion to be able to rise over the situation or above the situation. Okay, state of affairs, situations, and circumstances. Here on the Rise movement, Rise to Prosperity, anything that has to do with On the Rise Network and outreach. We have a philosophy, and our philosophy is that we educate, motivate, and inspire individuals to rise above life situations and circumstances. We educate, motivate, and inspire individuals to rise above life circumstances. So that means it may have been that way for years. That's what most people use when they want to stay, they don't want to change. But we're looking to rise above those situations and circumstances. I can still stay in my home, my house, my job, but once I change my mind about my situation and circumstances, my situation and circumstances may not change, but how I respond to them does. So instead of being downtrodden or feeling like, I'm just going to work and my life is useless or whatever is hopeless, I now have hope. I now see that I have purpose, and I begin to rise to my purpose. So whether I'm doing it on a job that pays me well or a job that's not, I realize that I am an individual. I belong to a community, and what I do as an individual contributes to my community. Be that my family, be that my church, be that my job, be that my neighborhood, be that my community. Anyone whose presence I enter, I impact. And when that can be conveyed to everyone within that community that they impact, if they can start thinking in any sort of unison, you'll begin to see a change. You will begin to see a change. And a lot of people are afraid of that. The rest of this state of affairs here is a blank page, because the things that I'm addressing, they aren't to tell you somebody's history. They are to inspire someone in their future actions, their goals, their activities, actually even in their thought. So I'm going to leave this last page blank. And can you imagine what should have been on there? That's where the individual comes in at. See, the individual has to have eyes. You have to be able to think, because when you look and you think, when we have those community meetings, those community forums, and you speak and you can give something of value in those type conversations, that might result in some sort of change within your community. And that's what it's all about, change. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Grant me the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And when you know the difference, you can decide whether you're going to act or not. But you can do so with the right mindset. See, it's different when someone is foolish and they don't know. That's one individual. But all of us aren't foolish. Some of us do know. And when we do know and we don't act, that's irresponsible, to say the least. But some individuals don't really see themselves as having the same obligation to their community. So, as in the individual, I would encourage you, if there's something that you can do, a difference you can make, do it. Don't leave it to the next individual, because not every individual is community minded as you may be. So sometimes we just have to take it upon ourselves to be the difference. And that difference makes a world of difference. I want to share something with you all. I went to this event and I didn't pull it out, so I'll get it eventually. But there was a guy I was interviewing, and this was around the time of Black Lives Matter. And I say around the time of Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter still is an active organization. But during the time when the protests and all that was going on, most of the people in the street were singing or saying Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And I agree 100%. Black lives do matter. But when it comes down to what they are doing and what they are saying or whatever it is we're standing for or against, it should be something that lasts beyond an emotional incident. I called it a catalyst when our brother was killed by the police officers and people took to the street and their cry was say this person's name and say that person's name. And I actually did an interview of a young man. It was kind of prophetic what he said that in 6 months these people won't even, I don't know how he worded it, but what it alluded to was when the emotion dies down, these people won't even be in the streets. And we both all know that proved to be true. Let me see what this next video is here. I got to figure out a way to get them labeled properly.
First, things are better.
A 1960s era civil rights activist compares the protests of today to the historic events of the past. News 8's Alicia Summers spoke to a local bishop who walked alongside Martin Luther King Jr. and shares his words of wisdom.
Bishop McKinney weighs in on the civil unrest across the country because he has experienced and witnessed more injustices than many of the protesters have been alive.
I understand the depth of the anger. I understand it because I've lived through nearly 100 years of that.
Bishop George Dallas McKinney lives in Chula Vista now, but in the 60s he marched with one of the greatest American civil rights leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther tell us that we will either learn to live together as brothers or we'll perish together as fools.
He says the civil rights movement today differs from back then. For one, most of the protesters are younger and have a different attitude.
Today, we've got a group of young people who do not have the exposure to philosophical teaching that Martin brought to us and do not have the patience to deal with the injustices and the inhumanity.
However, both movements have the same goal.
Now, there is a demand that there would be justice for all.
Civil unrest in the 60s led to the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 68, providing equality for all.
First, things are better today than they were back then. I can testify to that. We have a tremendous number of people of color in public office now, elected to serve as mayors and governors and legislators and district attorneys and so forth.
Bishop McKinney commends protesters for seizing the moment now to invoke more change and wants to remind everyone to choose the path of righteousness, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did.
What we send into the lives of others will come back into our own, and we reap what we sow.
He also says racism is a very complicated issue, but one way to help end racism is by helping people understand that there are not several different races, but rather one race, the human race, and we all need each other.
All right. He said that, didn't he? There's only one race, the human race. And it's interesting. One race, the human race. We live in a community where a community, in a sense, it says that it takes a community to raise a child. But communities, if they're going to be an effective community, they must know how to police itself. It must know how to correct itself. It must know how to repent to itself and of itself. And a community that does not demand that of itself isn't much of a community. So when he says there's only one community, the human race, that is there's only one race, the human race. I agree with that. And I remind you the words, Dr. King, he who gets behind in a race, even if it's the human race, he who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. Think about that. Human race, run faster than the man in front. Reparation because of what the man in front may have done to the man that is behind. You know, my brother just said something very powerful. He said, go the way of righteousness. When you think about righteousness, there are just certain discussions that should be mute points at this time. There's just certain things that we should be asking, okay, how do we fix it? But until that happens, I want to encourage you all. I like what he said, that the people, young people today did not get what Dr. King gave them. It was a philosophy, a philosophical additive for the movement. And I want to invite you all again to the On the Rise movement. This movement isn't something about me. It's kind of, as he alluded, it's really about righteousness. Because if you're doing the right thing, you're already on the rise. You just need to know that you are. When enough people realize as individuals that I am on the rise, then they will begin to realize that being on the rise is actually contagious. Nelson Mandela used a poem written by Mariam Williams, if I have the name correct, that said, it's not my inadequacies, but my greatness that frightens me most. So if I aspire to be great, I liberate others to be great. And if I take the opportunity or seize the occasion to rise to the occasion, at that point, I am in a position to educate, motivate, and inspire others to rise above their situation and circumstances. So the next person is in a position to seize the moment or the occasion to rise is the person that I was just able to help educate, motivate, or inspire to rise above their situation. And as we all begin to aspire and we all begin to rise, we begin to rise higher and higher. And our communities then begin to change. And then once we begin to see that we can rise, we begin to see what righteousness can and will do, we can impact any community that we're a part of. So that 1.3 trillion, I'm mentioning that because there's some place I'm going with this. When we rise mentally, we rise physically, we rise spiritually. And if we're going to rise mentally, physically, and spiritually, we need to be rising to prosperity. Yes, we're getting someplace. We're not there yet, but stick with me. We're going to get there. So when it comes down to rising, when it comes down to being on the rise, it calls for a certain people. It calls for a certain mindset. And you know, when you're on the rise, you can actually, it becomes contagious. I'm going to share this little clip with you. As you listen to this, imagine the scene. Imagine where it took place. Something that I would have never thought would happen. But God allowed me to stand and speak into someone's life. Something that I doubt if anyone in attendance will ever forget.
What's your name? And
I am on the rise. Repeat.
And what that means is this: no matter what my situation is, if I'm 20 to a desk, it doesn't make a difference because my mind is still functioning. My heart is still functioning. And until they fix the desk situation, what are we going to do, Juliana?
Rise. We're gonna rise.
No, that doesn't sound right. Y'all tell Juliana what we're going to do.
Rise.
Oh, that's not good either. Let's try it again. What are we going to do? What's my name? Mr. E, but on the rise. And what's your name? Y'all can't talk at the same time, right? Yeah. But you can think the same way. When I say what's your name, just say we are on the rise. What's your name? We are on the rise. What's your name? We are on the rise. What's your name? We are on the rise. Now that sounds like African to me.
Oh, my goodness.
Every time I watch that, it takes me back there. But I want to ask you, what's your name? Your name isn't important, but it's the spirit you come in. I'm Minister Jamie Eatman, and I am on the rise. I thank you all for joining me. I hope that you will join me next Friday. And until then, whatever the occasion, if you have the opportunity, rise to the occasion and educate, motivate, and inspire. And get this, because sometimes there's more knowledge in the room. Be educated, be motivated, and be inspired so that we can all rise together. Peace and blessings.